Some stories are too unsettling to forget, and some encounters leave an imprint so terrifying that they're impossible to explain. Across desolate highways, isolated forests, and the quiet comfort of homes, strange beings have appeared. Beings that challenge what we believe about the natural world. Tonight, we bring you 3 chilling creature encounters that defy logic and reason. Grab a blanket, turn down the lights, and prepare yourself for the unknown. As the sun began to set, Mark found the perfect spot to set up camp. A small clearing surrounded by towering pines. With a fire crackling in the dark, he sat down to eat, watching the stars peek through the canopy above. Everything felt right, until it didn't. It started as a faint rustling in the underbrush, too faint to be anything but an animal. Mark, always rational, brushed it off as a deer or some other creature passing by. But as the night wore on, the rustling grew louder and closer. Mark's instincts kicked in. He shone his flashlight toward the sound, expecting to catch a glimpse of whatever was out there. But instead, he saw nothing. The forest was empty, or so he thought. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it, a dark figure, hunched and impossibly fast, darting between the trees. Mark's heart pounded. He was sure he wasn't alone, but this wasn't any animal he'd ever seen. The figure was too tall, too deliberate in its movements. It was watching him, stalking him. In a panic, Mark packed up his gear and began hiking back to his car as fast as he could. But no matter how fast he moved, the creature was always just behind him, close enough for him to feel its eyes on him, but never close enough to be fully seen. Hours later, as dawn finally broke, Mark reached his car and sped off, vowing never to return to those woods again. To this day, he can't explain what he saw, or why it followed him. Our next story takes place on a desolate highway in the heart of Nevada, where long-haul trucker Sarah experienced an encounter she will never forget. Sarah had been driving these roads for years, comfortable with the endless stretches of nothingness that define the American desert. But on this particular night, the silence of the road wasn't peaceful. It was oppressive. It was after midnight when Sarah spotted something unusual on the side of the road. A lone figure, standing still in the headlights. At first, she thought it was a hitchhiker, a rare sight on these deserted roads. But something about the figure made her uneasy. The figure didn't move. It didn't signal for a ride. It simply stood there, watching as her truck approached. Sarah slowed down, her curiosity piqued. But as she passed, the feeling of being watched became unbearable. Her blood ran cold. In her rearview mirror, the figure was no longer on the side of the road. It was in the bed of her truck, sitting perfectly still. Panic surged through her. She floored the gas, speeding down the highway, her heart pounding with every mile. But no matter how fast she drove, the figure remained in the back, silent, unmoving, a dark presence that seemed to defy explanation. Finally, Sarah reached the next town. Her hands shook as she pulled over, scrambling to check the back of her truck. But when she did, the figure was gone, vanished without a trace. To this day, Sarah refuses to drive that stretch of road alone. Was it a hallucination, a ghost, or something else entirely? She may never know. But one thing is certain, she'll never forget the strange passenger who appeared on that lonely highway. Our final story brings us to a small rural town where the Dawson family moved into a centuries-old farmhouse, hoping for a fresh start. But from the moment they arrived, something about the house felt off, especially for their youngest daughter, Emily. Emily was the first to notice. Every night, she would tell her parents the same thing. There was a face outside her window, pale, gaunt, and staring back at her with empty eyes. Her parents dismissed it as a child's overactive imagination. After all, her room was on the second floor. Who could be outside her window? But night after night, Emily insisted. The face was always there, watching her. At first, her parents thought nothing of it, until one evening when they decided to investigate for themselves. As they circled the house, shining their flashlight toward Emily's window, they saw it, a figure, floating outside the second-story window, just as their daughter had described, pale, gaunt, watching. In a panic, they rushed upstairs, but by the time they reached Emily's room, the figure was gone. The next morning, they found no evidence of anyone, or anything, having been there. But from that night on, strange occurrences plagued the house. Objects would move on their own, and whispers could be heard in the dead of night. The Dawsons eventually moved out, unable to explain the haunting presence that seemed to target their daughter. The farmhouse still stands, abandoned and decaying, with the mystery of the face at the window remaining unsolved. These stories remind us that there are things in this world that can't be easily explained, things that lurk in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal themselves. So the next time you find yourself alone in the dark, remember these encounters, because you never know what might be watching you. Sleep well, if you can.